Sarah and Jane, he calls them his red aunts.
Right.
Because they're the Spencer red hair. Well, they were when they were younger.
Well, let's speak about the Spencers. When Harry came over for his uncle, Lord Fellowes' funeral, he was surrounded by the Spencers. Lady Jane Fellowes, who was who was Lord Fellowes' widow,
yeah.
and also Diana. She's Diana's sister, and his uncle Earl Spencer. And he stayed at Althorpe. If Harry is estranged and no sense of reconciliation from the royal family, are the Spencers the answer to his desire to come back to the UK and build bridges in the UK?
Yes, I think the Spencers probably are the answers. The answer, I mean. I feel that he's always, as he said himself, been very close to his red aunts. And I think that he gets on with his uncle, Charles. And obviously he went to stay at Althorpe for the weekend because, of course, that's where it was Diana's, the anniversary of her death, and that's where she's buried on the island there. So, and I think Harry tries, and certainly used to with William, go every year to visit her grave, you know, as near as anything around the time of her birthday. And I think the Spencers are actually making a big effort to include him. And they've got all, you see, obviously the Spencer children, if you like, well, they're not children, they're grown up now, Harry's cousins, he's actually become quite close to.
Well, this is your area of expertise, the world of Princess Diana and the world of the Spencers. Do you think the royal family would be nervous about Harry becoming close with Earl Spencer? We always remember what Charles Spencer said at the funeral, where he talked about, you know, we, the blood family, will look after Harry and William. I mean, are we on the road to more confrontation if he's closer to Earl Spencer and the other Spencers?
Yeah, I suppose that's a very good point, Matt. But because King Charles, well, it was Prince Charles then, had this big fallout with Spencer over the funeral arrangements for Diana, and they have never got on. He's tricky. I mean, I think he's a very intelligent man, but he's obviously tricky. Anyone that's had 3 wives, I think he's had, can't be that easy. But he's a great historian, and he runs Althorpe, obviously very professionally, and you know he's. I mean, I met him, but I haven't met him recently, and he was fun. And Diana, of course, was quite close to him, except towards the end, and she really fell out with her brother because she wanted a house on the estate, and there were loads and loads of cottages there. I think we've talked about this before. And he said, no, I can't put up with the publicity and the baggage that you bring with you. And she was really hurt and really angry and refused to speak to him after that, and then went off on holiday with Mohammed Al Fayed, and of course the rest is history.
The rest is history, and it's very important to Harry. I mean, he's often talking about Diana, many interviews that he's done in recent years to market his book or to promote his book. He's often spoke about so in depth about the memory of Diana. I was recently reading your book. It's called your most recent book, my favourite book of yours, by the way. And I've said that to you off camera, and I'll say that to you again. I think it's a very good book. My Mother and I. It tells the story of Charles and the late Queen, but in it, there's quite a lot about Princess Diana, and you spent a lot of time with Diana, private, you know, probably the same distance as we are over a cup of tea or having a glass of water and
a bit closer than that.
and having a nice little chat. She must have many times spoken to you about Prince Harry. She died when he was 12 years old.
He was 12, nearly 13, yes. Yeah. Not many times, but I did really eke it out of her because when I last saw her, which was, you know, very shortly before she died, I was writing a book about William and Harry, and I really wanted to talk to her about them, and she opened up, as she always did, and she said that she at one time she really worried about William because he had no interest. Yeah, I don't want to be king. That was when they were younger. But then she started to be concerned about Harry because she said he had no interest in learning. He never picked up a book. I know he's dyspraxic, which makes it more difficult, but she obviously really tried to help him. But all Harry really wanted to do was have his mother to himself.
Right.
And he would sometimes... pretend that he was ill at school, so she'd come and pick him up and take him home, and then he could sit watching television with her all afternoon and snuggle up to her. He was a very tactile young boy and very, very close to his mother. And I remember after William went on his gap year, way back on Operation Raleigh, Harry said when he came back, he's much nicer now. So this myth that Harry and William were very close is a myth. They were only close, really close, after their mother died. Of course, they unified, and they were the only two people that knew what it felt like. But they weren't very close as youngsters.
Well, Harry mentions this quite a bit. He talks about the sibling rivalry, and he moaned in spare, saying that he complained that William ignored him when he went to Eton, which big brothers sometimes do. Your younger brother's embarrassing. But did Diana ever talk about this sibling rivalry that we're seeing playing out now? I mean, he's called the books... We keep banging on about this book. It was years ago. He called the book Spare. He still has a problem with the fact that he is the younger brother to William. Did Diana ever mention that or see that as a problem between the
Yes,
boys?
I mean, we talked about it quite a lot because she said, I worry for Harry because... and I'm really, really careful that he's not treated differently than William because, for instance, when they used to go and see the Queen Mother, she'd pat the chair and say, come and sit here, William, and completely ignore Harry, and that really upset Diana, and that's one of the reasons she said to me she wanted him to go to Eton rather than some other school which might have suited him better. She said, because she didn't want people to say he's stupid, he can't get in there. She was very concerned about his sort of feeling of inadequacy with William.
So did it play out as children? Did Diana suggest that it was obvious that Harry had a problem with his older brother?
Yes, even when they were very little, when William first went to Miss Minor's, which was the baby school, when Harry first went there, after William had been there, they showed, the teacher there said to him, here, Harry, play with this clay. And so William used to be really good at this, making model figures. So Harry picked up the clay and threw it down and said, no. So from a very, very young age, Harry felt inadequate. Now, it was nothing to do with Diana, nothing to do with Charles, but it was just there. It may have, maybe it was to do with the nannies, because, of course, I'm not talking about Barbara Barnes, who was completely brilliant, but sometimes the nanny will focus on the more important child. It's just a matter of what happens. Happened when Charles was young, and Prince Philip actually fired the nanny. But it could have been that, but he was always very conscious of being second in command.
Did Diana ever suggest a way of resolving that? Did she fear for the future in any way, or did you ever discuss how she thought the boys might grow up with this kind of atmosphere?
I think she feared more, as William was growing up, because he was 15 when she died, or yes, he was 15, and Harry was 12 going on 13. She worried much more for Harry because she just wasn't sure which way he was going to go. And when he was a little boy, William used to bully him quite a lot, which is perfectly normal. And Harry would always take the blame for the scrapes they'd get into. Again, perfectly normal with young boys. But Diana was very conscious of Harry being a very sensitive child.
Squaddies, before we get into this one, I need you to understand something. Sometimes the rota's own experts say the quiet part out loud, and then everybody just moves on like it didn't happen. That's exactly what happened in a recent royal panel segment about Harry reconnecting with the Spencer side of his family. On the surface, it's being sold to you as Harry snubs the Windsors, runs to Althorpe instead. Palace-friendly commentators are dressing it up as drama, as division, as Harry being difficult again. But if you actually sit with what royal biographer Ingrid Seward said on air, not what the headline says she said. What she actually said, you get something completely different. You get a biographer, someone who was close enough to Diana to have had these conversations directly with her, essentially confirming that the favoritism Harry has talked about for years was real. That Diana saw it. That it started before Harry could even read. And instead of that being the story became Harry has a problem with being the younger brother. As if that's a personality flaw. As if it's not the completely predictable result of growing up inside an institution that ranks its own children by birth order and makes sure they know it before they're even old enough to understand what a monarchy is. So today we're breaking down what actually got said in that segment, why the framing around it is doing a lot of heavy lifting to protect the institution, and what it tells us about why Harry keeps ending up back at Althorpe instead of Windsor. Let's get into the receipts. Now look, I want to be fair here, because that's how we do things on this channel. The panel wasn't some hit piece. Seward isn't a deranger. She's a long-time royal biographer, and by most accounts, some of what she shared came from a place of real closeness with Diana. The panel even frames some of the sibling dynamics as normal brothers, roughhousing, boys being boys, that kind of thing. On paper, that's a reasonable, even generous take. Every family has friction. Every set of siblings pushes and shoves. If that's all this was, there'd be no story here. But here's where the Steelman falls apart the second you actually look at the specifics being described. Because normal sibling stuff is not what's being described. What's being described, in Seward's own account, is a structural hierarchy, an institution that made sure two little boys knew, before they'd even started primary school, that one of them mattered more than the other. That's not siblings squabbling over a toy. That's a family business assigning value to children based on birth order and then acting surprised when the spare grows up with something to say about it. Let's start with what actually got described in that clip, because it's more damning than the panel seemed to realise. Seward describes a scene most of us would call textbook favoritism if we saw it in any regular family. The late Queen Mother patting the seat next to her, calling William over, while Harry is essentially invisible in the moment. She describes a teacher handing Harry clay after William had already been praised and celebrated for his model-making, and Harry throwing that clay down. Not out of a tantrum. Out of a kid who had already absorbed, at an age when most children are still learning to tie their shoes, that he was the backup plan. This isn't Harry's version of events from a memoir advance. This isn't something dreamed up for a Netflix documentary. No matter how hard the rota wants you to believe, every uncomfortable royal story only exists because Harry needed a paycheck. This is a royal biographer, someone the institution has historically trusted enough to platform, confirming on air that Diana herself worried more about Harry than William as the boys got older. Not because Harry was troubled, because Diana could see the current pulling him toward feeling secondary, and she sent him to Eton specifically by Seward's own account, so nobody could say he wasn't smart enough. Read that again, squaddies. A mother felt she had to strategically place her son in an elite school just to preempt people questioning his intelligence relative to his older brother. That's not parental paranoia. That's a mother responding to a family system she'd already watched do this to her younger son in real time. And when Seward describes William bullying Harry quite a lot and calls it perfectly normal, I'm going to push back on that gently, the way we always do here. Rough and tumble between brothers is normal. A power imbalance engineered by the institution both boys were born into, where one brother's importance is structurally guaranteed and the other's is structurally diminished, is not the same thing, even if it looks similar from the outside. The palace and its defenders love flattening this into brothers fight sometimes, because that framing turns the eventual rift between Harry and William into an overreaction instead of what it actually is. The long-delayed consequence of something the family itself built into the foundation. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because this is where the panel, probably without meaning to let something slip, that the institution usually works very hard to keep buried. The conversation turns to Charles Spencer's 1997 funeral eulogy, the one where he stood in front of the entire world and promised to protect his sister's blood family. The question gets raised. Does Harry growing closer to the Spencers now risk confrontation with the Windsors? And Seward's answer, essentially, is yes, because there's history. King Charles had a serious falling out with Charles Spencer over funeral arrangements back in 1997, and the two never fully reconciled. Strip the polite royal commentary language off that for a second, and here's what's actually being confirmed. There has been a documented, acknowledged rift between the Spencer side of Harry's family and the Windsor side going back to the day they buried Diana. 28 years. And Harry gravitating toward the side of the family that never fought him for the narrative isn't some brand new act of rebellion in 2025. It's the continuation of a pattern that's been in place since he was 12 years old. The rota wants you to read Harry's closeness with the Spencers as fresh evidence he's drifting further from the family. What it's actually evidence of is that the family was never one unified thing to begin with. It split at Diana's funeral, and Harry has spent his entire adult life quietly choosing which half of that split to stand closer to. Think about what it really means that two branches of the same extended family have been at odds since 1997. And the public is only now being handed this history, dressed up as fresh royal intrigue about a funeral more than 2 decades old. Charles Spencer didn't just deliver a eulogy that day, he drew a line, publicly, between the family that raised Diana and the institution he felt had failed to protect her. That line didn't disappear because time passed. It hardened. And it shaped exactly which relatives Harry could lean on without feeling like he was choosing a side against his own father. So, when commentators frame a visit to Althorpe as some fresh development worth decoding for reconciliation clues, they're conveniently skipping over the fact that this rift predates almost everything we usually get blamed on Meghan, on California, on the memoir. The Spencers were never a neutral side door option. They were the one branch of the family that showed up. There's a moment in this segment that I think deserves way more attention than it got, because Seward nearly says the quiet part out loud and then visibly catches herself. She starts to suggest that a nanny may have... You cannot have it both ways. Either the favoritism shaped Harry, in which case it deserves to be named honestly. Or it didn't. In which case, stop dragging it out every single time you want a tidy explanation for his choices as an adult. There's one more moment I want to flag, because it's genuinely sad, and I don't think it got the weight it deserved anywhere else in the coverage. Seward describes young Harry pretending to be sick at school just so Diana would come pick him up early so he could have her to himself for an afternoon. Curled up, watching television, no William, no royal duties, just his mum. She describes him as very tactile, very close to Diana. And then, almost in the same breath, she says the idea that Harry and William were close as children is a myth that the brothers really only bonded after Diana's death. Because grief was the one thing they both understood in exactly the same way. Sit with that for a second, squaddies. Two boys who weren't especially close as children, thrown together by an unimaginable tragedy at 12 and 15, then expected by an entire country to perform brotherly solidarity in public for the rest of their lives, whether or not the underlying relationship could actually carry that weight. When people act mystified about why the relationship between Harry and William eventually cracked under the pressure of adulthood, marriage, and constant public scrutiny, I think the honest answer is sitting right there in this segment. That bond was built on shared trauma, not on a childhood foundation. And shared trauma is a real bond, but it's a fragile one. Fragile bonds don't hold up well once real pressure gets applied. And Harry's adult life has been nothing but pressure. So where does that leave the actual question the panel was pretending to ask? Are the Spencers some kind of substitute plan for Harry, a workaround because the Windsors won't fully welcome him back? I don't think that's it at all. I think the honest read is that the Spencers were never a backup plan. They're simply the one part of Harry's extended family that has consistently shown up for him without conditions attached, going back to a funeral eulogy in 1997, that, by the institution's own biographer's account, the Windsors still haven't fully let go of. Real reconciliation with the institutional royal family, if it ever happens, was never going to run through Althorpe, because Althorpe isn't where the power sits. But the way this coverage frames Harry's relationship with his mother's family as a symptom of estrangement rather than a source of stability tells you exactly what the real agenda is. Keep the story centered on Harry as the difficult one, the wounded one, the problem to be managed. Instead of on a family system that, by its own biographer's account, taught a 12-year-old boy he was the backup plan before his own mother was even in the ground. I want to know what you think on this one, squaddies, because I think there's genuine room for disagreement even among people who are firmly in Harry's corner. Do you think the closeness with the Spencers is really about family stability for Harry? Or is part of it a pointed, deliberate contrast to how the Windsors have treated him? And on the sibling question, do you buy Seward's read that Harry and William were never truly close as kids? Or is that an oversimplification of something a lot messier? Drop your take in the comments. I read every single one, and I genuinely love how this community actually engages with the nuance instead of just picking a side and yelling about it. If breakdowns like this are useful to you, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. We've got a lot more receipts coming. And if you want to support the channel directly, there's a link down in the description. It genuinely helps keep independent analysis like this going, instead of leaving the whole story to the same outlets we just spent 20 minutes picking apart. See you in the next one, squaddies.